Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Ji Xiaojun with Charlotte and Julian. Welcome again to Crossover. And today, as the starter, we're going to introduce a little project done by a Chinese German. She's been living in Europe for many years, and recently she did a project, a very interesting project, to compare the Chinese ways and, well, German ways or Western ways of living in many different aspects. And it's been published in a journal called Women of China. First started in 1950s. It's an English journal introducing Chinese women to the whole world. It's been distributed in over 130 countries and regions.
I was going to say, it's a very established journal.
It is. Yeah, you know about this journal. Let's just take a look at the picture of this author, Liu Yang. She's a designer born in Beijing and moved to Germany at 13, lived and studied in Berlin, London, and New York. The interesting part of her project is, she's comparing different lifestyles, Chinese and Western, and she's got an exhibition of her portraits. She's doing that with all these different pictures. And that was a huge success back in Germany. So today we're going to discuss all these pictures.
That sounds like a really cool project.
Exactly.
And photos, using pictures or, to compare the two cultures. That's why I can't wait.
It's like a cartoon or what. Let's just take a look. The first one.
Okay.
Simply by looking at, do you know what it means?
Yes.
What is it?
Oh, yes.
What is it?
Well, it's the different way of thinking. The way we think of doing one certain thing, the so-called Western way is very simple. I want to do something, I'm going to tell you that I want to do that, and can you help me? But the Chinese way is that, I could ask him, but maybe he's going to interpret it a different way. So maybe I'm going to ask another person to ask him how the other person would react if I asked that. And then if it doesn't work, try to find another way. Maybe I do it another way. Well,
nice try, Julian.
Anyway, if anyone understands what I'm trying to do. But no, I'm sure Chinese people understand what I'm saying.
I said nice try, but basically this is about how we express our views.
Oh.
It's
same thing.
Yeah, well, slightly different. I mean, the blue side is supposed to be, well, the Western style. When you want to express your opinions, you tend to go straight.
That's what I said. You say directly what you say to the person.
And for Chinese people, because we have this belief, if you go too straight, that means you're not being polite.
Right, and you might offend people, or
Exactly.
you might say the wrong thing, or, do something that's not appropriate. But it fits in with what you were saying.
It's basically the same thing. Then if it can be about an opinion, or it can be about doing something.
But the artist in these two pictures was trying to express the way that Westerners versus Chinese people express themselves.
Yeah, I mean, because Chinese people tend to think, okay, we try to make it ideal, and I don't want to offend anyone. When I try to express my own opinions, I try to make it a bit mild, and to be mild is a way to show politeness.
Right,
and it
also
complicates things, obviously.
Well, it can complicate things, but it's also a way of helping everyone, have face. Like, you don't want to say something that will make someone lose face.
This is all behind a very, very deep concept in Chinese philosophy, which I think is one of the most beautiful things in Chinese philosophy. Which is what we call 以和为贵. So to translate it for me, please.
It's about harmony, peaceful
harmony,
nature.
Is the most important.
Yes. So harmony is like at the core, not only of today's policies, but really the Chinese history and philosophy. And when you want to you also, do you say wipe out the angles, or how we say in Chinese that somebody speaks with or without angles?
Edges
or edges or corners, exactly. So without edges is very Chinese. So you want a round form. You want a circle.
Well, and you strive for balance too. I think harmony, balance is another key thing in China.
Yeah. Sometimes when I ask something to my parents and ask for their opinions, when they say no, you have to think about it. You have to insist on that for a while, and sometimes they still say no. But actually, we know because we're the same family. We know what they really want. You have to understand the true essence of it.
A friend of mine was doing a project in university with a Chinese student who came from mainland China to the States to study at university, and they were working on a project together, and my friend was hungry, and so she said, well, I'm going to make myself a sandwich because I'm starving. Would you like something? Would you like a sandwich too? And the Chinese student, out of politeness, said, oh, no, I'm okay. And so my friend said,
actually, she's
okay.
not.
All right, then I'll be right back. So she went, made a sandwich, was sitting there eating, and the Chinese student was sitting there just thinking, but I am hungry.
No, that's true. We are faced with that all the time. I'm sure your parents were being polite with you too. It's the way, when you're eating, even sometimes at the TV station, you're eating that hefan, which is like the simplest lunch boxes, and they ask you if you want some more rice. And you say, no, thank you. And they are going to give you more rice. No, I'm all right. No, I'll take some more. Especially when you're a foreigner and they consider you as a guest.
Some people say it's good to refuse 3 times. Like 3 is sort of the magic number.
Especially when we're having dinners, and sometimes we say, do you want this? And say, no, I'm full.
And you're still going to put a piece of it in my plate.
Just to show the hospitality, and this is, I don't know, you have to be in China long enough to understand the subtlety.
And it's they're respecting you. It's very respectful and very polite, and the way things are done here. And it's not, well, I don't care what you're saying, you have to eat this.
No.
It doesn't have that meaning at all.
No.
It's interesting because if you consider this example, if you think into the details, it's interesting to think about that. If somebody asks you, do you want this piece of meat? Okay, it's beef, good. So you say, no, I'm all right. And the other guy, no, please have it. Oh, no, I'm all right, thank you. And he's still going to put that in your plate. And actually, maybe you don't eat beef, or you don't want to eat beef, and you're leaving it here, and the other person to some point is going to notice, don't you eat that? No, it's all right, I'll eat it. And you don't know what to do. You're afraid to, you don't dare to offend the other person.
Out of politeness.
Yeah.
Out of politeness. So this piece of meat is going to stay here the whole meal.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the way it is, and we show our politeness and to be hospitable, and sometimes we say yes, possibly it's not the real intention, but when we say no, possibly it's not the real intention. So sometimes we might be straightforward. I mean, especially with the younger generation, where they say no, it does mean no. So we're only saying the traditional part and what's really happening in modern society, especially in the cities.
True, and historically that's sort of the way it's been. And again, yes, you're absolutely right. It's very much changing.
But at the same time, as you were saying, Xiaojun, on the previous show, it's changing. But sometimes you see even the younger generation, when they are young, they are more keen to do it. But once they grow into, become adults and into society, moving past the 30, 35, 40 years old, it changes back to the old traditions very often.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the power of traditions.
Exactly.
And every culture has them.
Exactly. And I just want to emphasize the reasons behind it, and to be mild, to be polite. That's what we consider as a very important part of being a civilized person in the Chinese culture, and that's why people are not that straightforward in expressing themselves.
I remember when I had people at home and I was asking, do you want something to drink? And people say, no, I'm all right. And then I wouldn't do anything. Okay, I'm going to drink mine if you don't want anything. And Chinese people say, how can you do that?
Yeah, you just be lazy because you've been living in China long enough.
Whereas I have the opposite problem of you. I went to an American friend's house the other night, and I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, can I bring you and your wife anything? And he said, no, we don't need anything. We're good.
But you still.
And I said, no, really, what can I bring? No, really, Charlotte, we don't need anything. Okay, well, I'm going to bring something anyway. And I did, because I didn't feel right not bringing anything.
That's right. Anyway, we have more pictures to show you after a short break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Crossover. We're going to move on to the next one and just take a look first. So, Julian, you're going to have your guess now?
I can
you know
guess.
it, Charlotte.
Society?
I guess it's trying to say, you know, in the Western world, we tend to live mostly by individuals, while in China it's more a group living style. You know, you tend to have connections with lots of people. It's a community life.
And I have to say that this is one of the deepest phenomenons in China, because it's the core of two different philosophies. The Western philosophy teaches you that you have to, as an individual, you have to make things change around you. This is in the Bible, this is in Greek mythology, this is philosophy, this is everywhere. Whereas in China, look at Taoism, it's going to teach you not to do anything, because you have to realize that you're not going to change the world.
You're going to respect the nature.
So the way to achieve...
The whole.
Exactly. So whereas the way to achieve individual recognition and success in the West would be to individually accomplish things, in Asia, in the ancient Chinese philosophy, it teaches you that in order as an individual to shine, you will need the community, you will need the society, you need to adapt yourself.
But talking about lifestyles, if we go back to the simple aspect of this picture, it's, you know, we tend to do things together with others. And these are the pictures showing the huge
Tour groups?
Tour groups.
They even have group weddings also.
Huge crowd. And we have to consider the fact China is really a country with a huge population.
Absolutely.
We're talking about 1.4.
So
the latest figure is 1.4 billion.
It's not hard to find your group.
Exactly.
Or to have a group, for that matter. Nighttime dancing.
Yeah,
and
I love this part,
performance.
actually.
I love it.
They would find a place and, you know, play music, and they would dance together.
And they have costumes.
Costumes,
which
exactly.
Is so great.
And that was the folk dance, and they have also the ballroom dance as well.
This is a scene I see downstairs from where I live all the time.
Under the
in
bridge.
evening. Or just out in the garden of our compound, you know?
That's true. It's a way, as we said, a way to do exercise, but it's also a social area, you know,
Yes.
where you meet friends.
A group-based exercise, as opposed to, say, going out and jogging or walking on your own.
This is one thing that you realize in China in terms of group versus individual. I remember a while ago, it's a guy who used to be the president of the Wine Federation, the International Wine Federation, and he was saying that he loved the Chinese ganbei culture. And I was translating, I thought, wow, you know, we hate that for wine, because for wine tasting, you don't do ganbei. And he was saying, well, if you can taste first, but I personally love the ganbei because a lot of people in the West are drinking alone. Whereas in China, it's always in society. You drink with others.
With others, you never drink alone.
Of course, you have to be careful with your health.
It's pathetic to drink alone,
Yes,
and that's why we had poems saying that. That means you're being lonely.
There's one unbelievable thing with Chinese culture, which is that, you know, if I'm inviting people for dinner, if you bring your friends, it's okay. Whereas I think in the U.S. it's kind of similar to friends. I mean, you don't bring people, even you don't even ask, because you know it would be not polite and people would be embarrassed to say no, but you know that people don't want you to bring your friends. Whereas in China, a lot of the times...
The more the merrier.
Exactly,
Yeah,
bring your friends.
You tend to have lots of friends from different areas.
Yeah.
Well, we have a term in Chinese called 宅女. I guess this term is from Japan, from Japanese. It's called otaku. Basically, they don't go out that much. I mean, they live by their own, and because, you know, with all the development of internet technology, you can survive without going out, because, you know, go buy stuff on the internet.
And apartments are more and more comfortable also.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've heard before, I went to school in a university in New York, in Manhattan, and a friend of mine was telling me that back before the invention or the advent of the air conditioner, or before it was made, you know, accessible by everybody, in Harlem, in the evenings, in the summer, everyone would come outside because it was cooler outside than it was inside. And you had a great community because everyone was outside talking, laughing, playing. And as soon as air conditioners came, that all stopped because everyone was then inside, staying cool. And that community was completely lost.
Yeah.
Totally. That's just the way it
Sometimes
is.
it's good or bad or the modern technology.
I
You
know.
live these days in skyscrapers, but you lose your community.
True.
The sense of being in that community.
You don't know your neighbors.
Being an individual, and that's basically just a lifestyle that people would choose to live, either in China or in other countries. And when we come back after a short break, we are going to present you more pictures, interesting ones. And welcome back to Crossover, and here comes the third picture. Let's take a look. Julian?
Aha! It's your turn.
Well, I think I belong to the to the category that on the right, but
On the
if
right
I understand
side.
it right, no.
Yeah, well, it's being punctual or not.
Well, but you know, this also, she's in Germany.
Yeah, the left picture represents, the Western world and
Punctual, if you say
being
12,
punctual
it's 12.
beyond time, sharp.
Right.
Say Chinese people are always late. Not necessarily.
Not really, but there's one thing. First of all, about the time and being late or not, being punctual, I don't think it's about Chinese versus Western. I have to say,
It's French
If you go,
versus
yes,
German.
okay.
I'm interested to hear what Julian has to say because you are the least punctual person I know.
I
Julian,
no, I'm not that bad. No, but
I'm giving you a hard time.
oh yes, I'm used to it. Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to try to be clear on this one. I do believe that in Europe, for example, Germany, England, are more punctual than Latin cultures. Either Italy or Spain or Portugal or
Countries
France.
around the Mediterranean.
Latin people, including French people, we are usually more keen to be late than Germans or English people. I think it's a fact. You cannot say that everyone is like that, but I think the proportions are bigger in those countries than in our countries.
Okay, fair
so
enough.
she is living in Germany. I totally understand that. If she was, even I went to Macau, the Portuguese influence. We were doing TV shows, and they were being so late. Even the local Chinese and the Portuguese people, and this is like the biggest proportion I've ever seen of a whole group of people being late, but all by their own. So,
In the ancient times, we didn't have clocks, we didn't have watches, but we did have the Chinese way of calculating time. The 日晷, you see
sundial.
the sundial. So, but that might not be that accurate. You have the time measurement in the approximate way, but not the exact way. So basically, what we had in describing time is like as long as it takes for a lunch, or a cigarette, or for a pipe.
So these were Chinese units of time.
I mean, you get an idea of how long it might be, especially in ancient times.
as we say in Chinese, it's 左右, so left and right, which is approximately the meaning
Although,
of it.
I have to say, from looking at that, in Beijing, it's impossible to be punctual.
Oh, with the traffic.
Because
You're talking about
traffic-
bad traffic.
Traffic is so bad. So it could be she's comparing Germany to Beijing.
But
Because when you have a car, you don't have that much traffic, especially in the average city in Germany or even in France. You have your car, you basically can know that you will be on time.
Or metro,
Or 5 minutes before time. Whereas in Beijing, it could be
You never
20 minutes
know.
before or
But
half
it
an hour
really-
late.
It really depends on when and where we're talking about in China. If you're talking about these offices, these companies, when you say 2 o'clock, that means 2 o'clock.
So
if
you
you're
have
going
to
to
do
a
before.
meeting,
When you say
Yeah.
we're going to start filming at 2 o'clock, filming crossover, it means we're going to start filming at 2 o'clock.
Julian, remember that.
I'm sorry. I have to say that recently, I'm not the one
Yes.
who's always there.
Recently, you've been very good.
I've
Okay,
been before you guys quite a few times.
Well, that's good. Good improvement. But sometimes, in some cases, when we are talking about a dinner, say, especially a family dinner, you're inviting your guests to come over to your house to have a meal together. In that case, or in a restaurant, the hosts tend to be there a bit early or at least punctual. The guests, they tend to be slightly later than
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to embarrass your hosts, being there earlier than the hosts.
It has to do with the language. You know, in French or in German, for example, with the grammar, we are used to speak with precise accuracy, with the grammar, with the verbs, whereas Chinese people are used to say things with a very approximate way.
Well, basically, we're going back to how we express ourselves. Is it direct to a point, or we use a mild way,
Right.
a polite way to express yourself?
Yep.
You know, that's all actually interconnected. And let's just move on to the next one. Take a look.
My turn.
Charlotte?
It's my turn, right?
Okay.
关系.
Connections.
Yes. People, relationships.
Yeah, recently we had quite a few episodes about guanxi or
Discussions
connections.
of 关系,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
It's more in the northern China than in the south that people are used to say, "Oh, I know that guy. I know somebody who knows somebody," and
If
you hear
they
that a
say
lot.
that, I mean, basically they're doing the showing off thing. But what this picture is saying, Chinese people tend to be connected with each other more than Westerners. But this might not be 100% true, because, I mean, as we said last time about guanxi, connections are everywhere.
They really
it's-
are.
Yeah, it's not always one-way traffic.
It might be, though, I think, more representative of maybe how much it's used on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I think it might be fair to say that maybe compared to France or the States, guanxi and that kind of thing is used more in China.
Sometimes with the guanxi or the connections, it does save a lot of trouble. Say, I'm looking for a French guy. You happen to know a French guy who speaks Chinese and who's, suitable one for this show. And I'm asking you, do you know anyone? Okay, I happen to know this one. This is the guanxi, how it works.
Right.
You know.
But that would happen anywhere.
Yeah.
But
It happens.
here, it definitely, this happens with Julian and myself a lot. He'll get called to do something and he might not have time, and he'll say, call Charlotte. Or I might get called and I might not have time, and I'll say, call Julian. So,
In this, and there is kind of I don't know if you understand it this way, but there is a kind of endorsement in it. When you introduce your friend to another friend, that means, you trust this friend, he's the one to do the job.
yes, and that's a good point.
This picture says it's about the Ivy League, all these universities in this Ivy League. You never realize how many American presidents are actually graduates from those universities.
From the Ivy League, Bush, Obama. Yeah, so in a way, that's a sort of guanxi chain, I suppose.
What's the term in English? Is it masonry, or I think that's the term for these kind of societies that have existed for centuries in Europe, and Mozart was a part
the
of
Masons.
it. Masons,
They're
yes,
called
so
the
it's
Masons.
masonry, right? Or is
Just the Masons.
The Masons, okay. And my father and my mother have tons of friends who belong to that, and it's really interesting what happens. I remember in my mother's orchestra, the solo trumpet player once was so drunk at a concert that the conductor, who's quite a powerful person, even politically, and he tried to kind of put him away, even kick him out of the orchestra.
Yeah.
And then he was even stronger than him in the Masons hierarchies.
And talking about guanxi in China, because both of you have been living in China for a long time, and sometimes it is just important to keep guanxi or the connections to extend your guanxis. But what are the ways that you think might be very effective in extending your guanxis or find new guanxis?
Gave name cards every day to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think just stay connected.
Yeah, because sometimes the connections are the born connections. Say you have classmates, schoolmates.
Right.
You have family members, and they have their own guanxis. But sometimes you have to build up the new connections in say distributing your name cards. But sometimes you do find your name cards on the floor, though. But
Yes, you do.
after receptions.
Yes.
But these are the ways that we might try out to find the new connections.
Yeah, or if you're invited.
Say no. You Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Ji Xiaojun with Charlotte and Julian. So today we're going to continue our series.
We go on.
Made it into a series of those pictures that the Chinese German has made.
How many pictures do we have? We were supposed to do at least the double that we did last time.
Well, it's good if we are able to provide more information to our viewers regarding these pictures.
There's a lot to talk about.
Exactly.
And these pictures are just sort of the sort of
ignition,
the lead-ins.
the fuse or the ignition point for.
So, Charlotte, I think you're going to be my English teacher. I don't find. Really, I'm gonna give you money every week. You know, teach me English,
sure,
please.
hey man, I
You
don't
can
mind.
do it by starting treating as a dinner then. Anyway.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Don't be late.
As a host. Okay, let's just go to the first fuse today. It's let's take a look.
Oh.
Have a little guess.
No.
No.
Someone is thinking of someone else, or what?
Yes, but China is on the right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
China's in the red.
Okay, this is about the way of expressing your anger. So basically, on the left side, Westerners or German people, when they're upset, they're upset.
They show it. Mm-hmm.
And on the right side, Chinese, when you see a face, a happy face, but maybe actually they are upset inside.
I think I was just recently back in the States, and I was quite struck by how people were very quick to express their emotions, whether it was happiness or frustration or anger or exasperation. You know, there was no filter. It was, you know, if I'm angry, I'm angry. If I'm happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Whereas in China, I mean, obviously it depends on the situation and what's going on, but if it's not too major a situation, say I'm upset with you, I might not say, you know, Xiaojun, I'm upset.
I'm not happy.
Or,
No.
you know, have a frown on my face. I
Still
might
about-
try to work through it.
Exactly, because this is you tend not to express it that directly, because this is not really the polite way to do it.
It's
Right.
still about harmony.
You know, that also gives the impression of Chinese people are shy in expressing themselves, and especially with foreign art troops. When they come to China, they're worried about whether they would get the response from Chinese audiences they expect, you know, because this is a show designed to make people laugh or make people cry, but sometimes out of their surprise, people are just responding as they would see in anywhere in the world.
That's true.
sure.
That's true.
Especially and then it depends of many things. It can be a different environment, especially in concerts. In the West, we have been educated to listen to concert, you know, very silently, without saying anything, without,
classical
you know,
music,
classical
maybe.
music and a lot of concerts. And you have, you know, like the New Year Eve concert, the Vienna one that they also do now in China. And Chinese people, I remember because I've been to a few concerts where for the encore, the conductor would choose to play one of those, you know, New Year waltz or, you know, those pieces, and the Chinese audience would respond even faster than the European audiences, who would be more like, oh, I don't know, should I or should I not, you know, whereas Chinese people are the first to clap and to get into it. So it depends.
Because we have this belief or the tradition, you know, if your feelings are all on the face, like your mom or your grandma.
Yeah, my mom.
Your mom, like your mom. You know, we say all your feelings, your happiness, your sadness are written on your face. And this is something considered as immature in the Chinese culture. It's something, if you don't have this self-control or self-restraint, you don't have the ability to control yourself, that means you're being naive and shallow.
And that connects back to harmony. The harmony.
Yes, it connects back to harmony. And also there's another problem that, as you say, it connects to being immature. And the real problem here is that people who, for example, are about to work with you or to give you something to do will be worried that you're immature or you're not reliable enough because of that, because you are too keen, you show everything too easily.
Well, and that indirectly says that you're more focused on yourself because you're showing everything you feel like showing, and you're not focused on the people around you and how that might affect them.
Yes, that's another thing.
But I do agree with you, Julian, on that point. I mean, if you are too expressive, say, in your feelings, that means you're not ready to do something. Because, you know, when we say you have to, when something happens around you, you have to take it in. You have to digest it before you make any response.
Exactly.
That's right.
Just turn your tongue in your mouth 3 times before you speak. There's one thing I remember. It's a kind of a cliche we used to talk about a lot. The businessmen, European businessmen going to Asia. Back then we were saying that Japan was the same, China was the same, that you could never see on an Asian businessman what he was thinking. So he could be very polite with you, and you were thinking, wow, he's going to work with us for sure. The deal is done, because you see the smile on their faces, and everyone is happy and to be with you, and this is what you think. And maybe, you know, he was insulting you, or maybe he was not happy at all, but for the politeness of having guests here come all the way there, they would seem happy. And this is something that puzzles a lot of the Western businessmen too.
Well, basically, it's being polite is being polite. Business is business. I mean, these are two lines.
Different things.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, we'll take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to discuss more pictures. And welcome back to Crossover. We're going to move on. So, another picture.
Next picture.
Oh,
It's my turn?
Your turn.
Okay, this is, I know this.
Yeah.
This is how people line up or don't line up.
Yeah, it's about lining
Queuing.
culture. But basically what it says, I mean, Westerns do follow the queuing rules, and it's saying the Chinese do not queue up.
Now you see people line up a lot more than maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yes?
I disagree with that as a fact of as a cultural fact. It's something you see a lot. And
Wait, see what?
Well, I mean, you see that still in China, many people don't queue, but you have to be very careful about that, because when I just came to Shanghai, I can tell you 10 years ago, you would go to a post office in Shanghai. If you don't, you know, just push people away, it's never your turn. But now it's totally different. It has changed a lot. So
I just want to show you a picture. Well, this is a long queue. This is the scene we see in the World Expo in Shanghai.
but here you don't have a choice. You have to
they're
queue.
the grids.
You're talking about these bars, you know?
Yeah.
But let me show you another picture. We don't have bars over here.
Let me think. What is
Wow.
it for?
It's
They want to buy the mooncakes or
iPad or iPhone 4 or what?
no, not
Not yet in China.
Not yet.
But, you know, this is, you don't believe it. And this is just to register for their marriage.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
If you look at how long this queue is, we're talking about queuing, lining up.
So I guess
This
some
is a
people,
long line.
Some people at the end of the queue might already know that they won't have the time to
No,
wait, you know?
actually, what they do, what the government did at the time, they extended the working hours to the full day,
what I wanted to
until everyone's happy at the time.
Because it was an auspicious day, and
Yep.
they knew that a lot of people would want to get married on that day, or
Exactly.
be registered.
And and that was also the opening day, the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and double happiness. So that's what we say.
A few 10 years ago, there was this little video circulating in the internet that was very famous. It was called Italy versus Europe, and showing how Italy was
No one lines
so
up.
messy. No one lines up. The buses never stop at the real bus stop. They stop a little bit further, or they're
Being flexible.
no, it was everything. The direction panels on the highway, or everything was such a mess. Everyone, even like the typical European asks for a cafe, and the Italian will say, "Oh, cafe with cream, but no sugar, please," and cafe on a big cup, but it's still an espresso. Whatever. Everyone has its own.
Yeah, I mean, lining could be a problem in many cases in China these days, but it's improving. But we even have a day dedicated to
That's
lining.
Right, queuing up.
The queuing up day.
Really?
Yes, being standing
It's like
in line
the 11th
properly.
day of November.
Yes, I'm not exactly sure about the date, but I remember getting a text message from China Mobile saying today is National Queuing Day. Please
Is it
make
national
sure.
or just Beijing?
I don't remember,
Yeah.
maybe, but please make sure to queue properly today.
Look at the number. The 11th day of November. See, it's like four people lining up.
That's true.
But talking about queuing culture, we do have a lining culture over here. Sometimes you don't see a line, but there is a line. There is a picture. These people are obviously, you see the picture as people sitting randomly around, but
Yes.
actually there is a queue. And people realize, they do know in what position they are. This is obviously a queue, and sometimes it is a line. You don't see a line, but people do realize, because you do realize there is a line. You see a bag or just, today's newspaper.
Now more and
Yeah.
more, especially in the banks and the post, you're going to have numbers.
It's a number system.
And I
Machine.
like the system better. We have to say though that for a lot of places, even now in China, and especially you see that it's at the train station or other places where people, don't queue that much. And you have to say that in our societies, we haven't been used to having that many people concentrated at the same place like this.
Good point.
And it brings, a very natural way, and you realize that you're going to be doing the same to
Good
some
point.
point. The same way, as we say, when you're driving a car and you have the pedestrian there, and in Europe, obviously, if there's no light and there's a pedestrian, somebody has 1 foot on the pedestrian, even if he hasn't even crossed the street, you're going to stop your car and let him go.
And in the States, you do the same.
But try to do that, say, at the train station in Beijing. You will never, your car is going to be stuck here the whole day because there's always tons of people
Yeah,
moving.
but again,
really tough.
if we go back to history, it's all about limited resources and a huge population, and it's like, this is the justification that people had to fight actually for the limited resources. And queuing, it might be a problem in some cases, but it's improving. We do see queues,
especially
lines.
in big cities now. I mean, I can't even think actually of the last time that I was in a situation like in the picture where everyone was just there and there was no line.
And in some cases, the interesting part is, in some cases you don't see a line,
But there is one.
but there is a line.
That's right.
All right, let's just move on to the next picture. Well, it's whose turn is it?
Julian's.
Julian.
Well, I think that's about how the individual is big in the Western society and how the individual is not the center of everything in the
a
Chinese
big
society.
me or a relatively
Yeah.
small me, the self-identity in the society or in the group.
This is something everyone kind of knows, even in the West. It's nothing new. I think the debate about community versus individual is much more interesting. Than
Yeah, I mean,
actually
this
saying-
actually, it's also interconnected with the previous picture we just discussed. It's about being individual or being in the group.
Right.
Because we always say you're a part of a group, a part of a team. Now, if you're a part of a team, obviously you're not that big.
No, because
So-
it wouldn't work. You wouldn't fit.
If you emphasize too much yourself as a part of a group, that means you're losing the self-identity. You're losing your individual personality, and that's what we are talking about a lot.
Yeah, and that's a debate that's going on all across, society and amongst all kinds of groups of people. And I think, not to sound like a broken record that keeps skipping on the same spot, but it does come back to harmony. I think maybe this is idealistic, but a balance between the two is probably where both sides should be sort of looking to go for.
Yes.
It isn't always about you, but it isn't always about the group either.
No.
Because every logic is right. the Western way is right, because if as an individual you always do as you're being told, there would be no history, there would be no changes in history. And obviously there are tons of changes in Chinese history, so you always have people who step up.
Yeah.
So this is not a wrong thing to do either, but it's just about the balance, as you were saying.
Exactly. I mean, what we're trying to do these days in China, we try to reach the balance of being a part of this group or being yourself at the same time. And especially when we talk about the new generation, what we have the label, called the post-80s generation. They are the generation who have this realization of being themselves. But at the same time, they're also making their contributions to the group they belong to at the time.
And so in that regard, now, today, 2010 is a fascinating time to be in China, seeing the transition happen, seeing the change and seeing the rebalancing going on. It's really...
Yeah, because in one episode before, we also talked about the 80s generation. The society actually labeled them as the lost generation, accusing them of only caring about themselves, not really about what's happening in the country, in the society, in the world. But actually, they do show their social responsibility a lot, especially when something as devastating as the earthquake in Sichuan or in Shanghai happened.
Yeah, sure. And then it comes back to every individual being different. I do believe that, as Charlotte was saying, it's just about a form of balance that everyone finds for himself. We all have to adapt in some way. Even you say the marginals, or people who seem a little bit eccentric.
At the margins.
Of the margins. Even the eccentric, so-called eccentric people, they even adapt to a lot of stuff. I'm sure a lot of those people and rock stars and people who seem totally off the average world we have, no, even them they adapt to a lot of stuff. So it's just the balance that is right for you. And as you say, we've been living in China for many years, and you don't feel that because China is more around the community than the individual, you lose your personality. No. You don't feel like that. You have your own balance.
Yeah.
All right, balance is important. And we'll take a short break to reach the balance, and when we come back, more pictures. And welcome back to Crossover. More pictures.
More pictures.
More pictures. Just take a look first.
Lots of people in China and not so many people in the West?
It's not about population.
Population?
It's really about, the street scene on Sundays in different places.
What? Oh, this is Sundays.
Sundays, okay.
We're saying, basically in many Western cities, you don't see that many people on streets,
That's true, actually. And also in Europe and in the States, too, in some places, stores close really early.
Yeah. Is it probably because of
really
people are
early.
going to churches? Or
religion. It's not about people going to churches, but we used to say that Sunday was the day was Christ's day, the day of Christ.
Sabbath.
And that's obviously, it has something to do with religion. But then now it's also a way in the Western societies to say, okay, we have to work, but we have to rest too. And even if it has religion roots, but now it's in, even people who don't believe in Christ and in any religion, which, it's nearly half of the population in some parts in Europe, even those people, they want their Sunday. I'm telling you, they don't want to work.
Whereas Sunday in China is a day that everyone goes out to play.
Exactly. Sunday, we've been working very hard for the past few days, and all these work days, we've been very hard working. And Sundays, this is the moment when we're going out to relax and have fun. And that, if you have the needs from society, that means business opportunities for all these companies, department stores, and that's why on Sundays it's all open. You were not talking about taking breaks actually on Sundays for these companies.
And Sundays are crowded no matter where you go.
Exactly. And actually, the thing that I found that was not quite used to when I first went to England at the time studying. And because at about 6 o'clock, not only on Sundays, but every day at nearly about 6 o'clock, and all these stores were closed.
Yes.
That's only when I got my time, after study or after work. So kind of, I couldn't find the right time to buy stuff.
But it's good for some businesses. You know, in France, same thing, especially in Paris. A lot of the official stores are going to close at least, maybe at most maybe 8 p.m. at the supermarkets. Some of the supermarkets will close at 7 p.m. The really, really big ones maybe later. But then in the city, when those ones close, you have all the little stores who sell the same things, the things
They
you do.
stay open.
And they sell for 3 times the price the supermarkets sell at
There's
sometimes.
the need and there's the demand and you have the service.
Supply and demand.
So
Exactly.
it's good for some businesses.
Okay, let's move on to the next picture. And it's...
It's good for some businesses.
Okay, let's move on to the next picture. And it's Julian's turn.
Let me see.
Party?
Yeah, this is more about party or gatherings. And, you know,
Well, this is an interesting thing because I was already thinking of Westerners having the habit of doing things individually or maybe with small groups of people. But if you think of parties, now it's interesting. I've had this discussion with a lot of people when even in Beijing. As for, let's say, Westerners, we are used to have parties at home rather than outside, and everyone bringing something. And maybe you talk to me, and Xiaojun talks to somebody else, and there are small groups, big groups.
Like in the picture.
And
The
all we
side.
need, exactly, and all we need is drinks. And
Yeah.
sometimes not even alcohol. And we can stay there just talking, chatting for 6 hours, whereas Chinese people, you're going to notice that Chinese people, if it's a group of people, at least 10 people all together, to some point somebody is going to step up and say, "Oh, let's do a game all together." Or
you have to organize something for your guests.
have to organize,
Yes.
or
you have to entertain your guests.
Otherwise, you're not a good host.
No.
Exactly, and if you're not doing your job as a host, some people are going to step up and say, "Okay, oh, you're good at dancing, right? You were a dancer back in the day. Dance something for
something
everyone."
for us.
And he's a great singer. Sing something for everyone.
And there is also one difference. I mean, we tend to organize a party with this circle. I mean, we have friends from different circles, right? These people all know each other. And we tend to, when it's a party for a Chinese family and tend to be from the same circle, all these people, they know each other. And if there's another group, we'll organize another gathering for this group. Well, in your receptions, you tend, if there's a birthday party, you tend to invite all your friends.
And it
It doesn't matter where they're from, whether they know each other or not. It's a huge party. I mean, and when they come over here to your place to attend your party, basically they say hello to you first, and then they're just gone somewhere. And that's why we see this picture. You tend to stand.
Yes.
For those receptions
Oh,
or
yeah.
parties,
Yeah.
we tend to sit down all together around the big table.
Yeah.
And for us, if we sit down, it's like saying, "I'm getting bored," or I just want to rest here, or "I don't want to participate," or there's little something
But
that.
I think it depends.
It depends,
I
but-
mean, if it's a house party, to just take a seat on the couch or something isn't.
Exactly. I mean, imagine 20 people come into your house and everyone's sitting down. I mean,
Yeah, that wouldn't happen.
it wouldn't happen.
No.
Whereas in China,
It
as a
would.
guest, you would make sure that everyone has a seat or try to find something out. You know?
Yeah, but if we extend this topic a little bit, if we're talking about bigger gatherings, like the family gatherings, I mean, the occasion for Chinese people to get together with your family members are basically these festivals. The most important one, the Spring Festival.
Spring Festival.
You know, you always go back home wherever you are, and you always try to get home with your family before the clock clicks.
Yeah.
That's before midnight of that day. And also we have this Mid-Autumn Festival, the Mooncake Festival, and we have this Winter Solstice Festival. And these are the days when we'll get together with Chinese, with your families, for Chinese people. What are the occasions for you to get together with families?
With family holidays, Christmas or winter holiday,
Birthdays.
birthdays, maybe if you're close.
But it's not a nationwide, say, campaign, you know, the nationwide
Maybe
festival.
winter holiday,
Yes. Winter holiday skiing.
whether it's Christmas or not. I mean, what winter holiday?
And in America, it's Thanksgiving.
Yes.
What do you call winter holiday? What we call winter holiday is usually in February in France.
winter holiday for us is usually around New Year's,
Oh, no,
Christmas, New Year's.
Okay,
but-
so that's different for us. We have the 2 weeks at Christmas and 7 days apart, New Year. But then we have another holiday, which is around February, the beginning of February, mid-February. And this is called winter holiday
For
in
your
France.
family.
And we call that winter sports because everyone goes skiing at that
with
time.
their families?
Whereas, yes, whereas of course around Christmas and New Year's Eve, no one
Yeah.
will think of going skiing.
But talking about gatherings and how we said how different it might be in China and in your countries and in Western countries, say Chinese people tend to invite friends from the same circle, while Westerners tend to invite friends from different circles to get together. But there is a new development like the internet community. You know, we have Facebook or Chinese versions of Facebook, the internet communities where you don't actually separate your different circles. They're all together.
That's true. You don't categorize them.
No.
You know,
It's
there
coming,
are-
it's coming.
There are groups on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So like your high school alumni group or your university group. And you can join those groups. And those are very much, you know, group circles. But if it's...
Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Ji Xiaojun with Charlotte and Julian. And we are going to continue our series on the pictures, well, designed and drawn by this Chinese-German Liu Yan, who's lived in Germany for many years. She was born in Beijing, but she lived in Germany for a long time, and she's designed this series of pictures just to show the differences of lifestyles in China and versus, I guess, in Germany, or maybe in a broader picture in Western countries. We've had several episodes on that, but
How many are we going to do?
we'll just continue
finish.
on and on.
Okay, the DVD and Blu-ray will be on. Will be out.
Yeah, basically, you know, because we have so many differences in all these different aspects of life. Chinese, Western, and when we say Western, I mean it's a broad sense, but basically when we compare Chinese lifestyle with Western lifestyle, there are always the differences to
Yes,
talk about.
yes.
So let's just get started with today's first picture.
Well, I think I know what it is.
So
This looks like a sound graph.
Yes. I would say
Chinese
not sure.
people are loud or the Western
Nah.
people are quiet?
I think that is what it is, but it can be two things actually.
Yeah.
I think what it means is about Chinese people talking louder than most Westerners, which is a fact.
On average.
Which is on average definitely a fact.
It's relevant, but basically what it says is in restaurants.
It's even more a fact.
Yeah, Chinese restaurants are loud. Heat and noise, 热闹. That's what it comes back to that, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
because we say this is if we go to a restaurant to have a meal with our friends, and that's the moment, the relaxing moment, to enjoy yourselves, and you know, talk to your friends and how loud it could be, and that's your moment, that's your place. to
Whereas
have fun
we-
with your friends.
We actually think the same way, but the outcome is totally different. We think, well, this is a relaxing moment. We should have peace and calm. So we think in a restaurant, well, in France, what we are taught is when you talk in a restaurant, talk just as loud so that the person who's with you can hear you,
But no one
make
else.
sure no one around at the other tables can hear what you say.
Maybe it's about the idea of the private space of each individual.
Yes, I think
privacy.
that definitely has something to do with it.
I don't think we have that tradition, at least not that strong. And
No.
basically, this is more to do with the speaking habits of Chinese people.
Speaking habits, and also, I mean, if this is specific to restaurant noise levels, I mean, like you were saying, you know, in China, if you go to a restaurant with friends or even family, it's a happy, joyous almost festive occasion, whether or not it's a holiday. And a lot of times in China, how that kind of festive atmosphere is expressed is in noise.
And also,
you have to have the noise.
One thing that a lot of Westerners, when they criticize this form of, and also the Chinese people who live abroad, very often, I wouldn't be surprised if this woman preferred the Western way too. She's living in the West. She might also be criticizing this, but we have to consider that in China most of the time, we invite a lot of people. And as we were saying in the previous show, maybe I invite you and Xiaojun, but at least if I invite you, you obviously can take your husband with you. And if I invite you, you obviously can take your wife with you without even telling me. I mean, sometimes you will tell me still by politeness or to be sure that I can make sure of the number of seats I book for. But in China, you will have more tables with at least 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, whereas in the West, we have a lot of small groups. So obviously,
and you're standing anyway for receptions.
Well, receptions is another thing. But obviously, Chinese people, if it's 2 of them, they're not going to be loud either. I mean,
No, that's true.
But you know, there is the new development. I mean, it really depends on where we're talking about. I mean, different styles of restaurants. Restaurants of different styles, Western restaurants, and we have this belief when you're in Rome, you do as Romans. That's exactly what we mean in many cases. So if it is a Western restaurant where everyone expected to be talking more quietly in the Western way with a sense of private space, then we tend to do that. But if you're going to a very much local restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, when you don't have that norm, when everyone is talking loud and happily, being together with their friends, and we do it this way, it's just right to do so.
And also, when you're in this kind of environment, you don't want, even when you're inviting, I'm sure you're inviting 10 people for dinner, you don't want everyone to be quiet.
No.
Because you're going to feel that, oh, everyone's getting bored at my, I invite everyone. And
of course, well, it goes back to what we were saying, I think, last show, about how in a gathering in China, the host will make people, oh, I hear you can sing us a song. There's always something going on to try to have the sort of festive atmosphere or, a happy, loud moment. Yeah.
And we don't want this longchang or the cold moments.
Exactly.
Or silent moments.
Exactly.
Yeah, but if we go back to the receptions in your countries, in Western countries, it's always noisy too. With the music, with the talking.
Pretty noisy. Yes.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So it's just different places, different occasions we have at the different levels of noise.
Yes, different behaviors.
Exactly. Let's just move on to the next one.
In
West
China, they drink tea.
Okay.
In the West, they drink soda.
Coke.
Yeah.
Soda.
Soda.
Okay, but
No.
this is this is what I thought it might be. But according to the original subtitle for this picture, it says it's drinks for stomachache, which I don't quite agree upon.
Then it is Coke, because
Yep.
Coke syrup. Originally, before Coca-Cola existed, Coke syrup was used to treat upset stomachs.
Yes.
In the West.
My father has been advised by
So
doctors.
Coke can be used as kind of a medicine.
Yes.
Yes, but my mom always did this when I was a kid. If I had an upset stomach, she'd pour me a little glass of Coke, but she'd get rid of the carbonation, because carbonation can sometimes aggravate your stomach.
Okay.
But the Coke syrup is supposed to calm your stomach.
But I mean, for Chinese parents, they would never, in most cases, give their children Coke when they're too little. I mean, it's just no good. But kids do love Coke.
Yes.
It's
But for example,
sweet.
I mean, not for stomach, but for I know in the winter, for example, a lot of Chinese people, and much more than the West, they will cook some Coke with some ginger in it.
Right, but that's for colds.
For colds, yes, but it's just to say that Chinese people think of Coke more than we think.
Coke can be medicine in China as well. And
exactly, you see?
Put Coke and ginger together and boil it.
Yeah,
boil it, yes.
They boil it. So the ginger goes into the Coke.
Yeah, but basically what I get from this picture is really more about Westerners drink a lot of I don't know, Coke or soda.
Or maybe cold beverages
Yeah.
versus hot beverages.
And Chinese.
Yeah, that's more interesting.
Yeah,
as a
China is
topic.
more.
Yeah.
China is more a tea country. We drink a lot of tea, and there is a very interesting story. And basically, what drinks you would serve if a friend comes to visit you at your house. So in Japan, they wouldn't even ask. They serve, basically just tea. Give you tea. And in Western countries, you would ask, tea or coffee.
Right, or I have A, B, C, D. What would you like?
Exactly.
And you would say tea or coffee. In Japan, in China, you'll be asked, okay, what would you like? And the answer in many cases would be anything.
Yeah, whatever's easiest. Or,
Whatever, I'm okay.
Yeah, 什么都行.
It
Doesn't
sounds
matter.
easy and simple, but when you say anything, yeah, what exactly that is?
And there was actually a brand of ice creams that around 10 years ago came out with with an ice cream which
Called
name
anything, or
was
whatever.
anything, 随便. That was the name of the ice cream because people you say what will you have? Anything.
Well, actually, that's the name of a dish as well in restaurants. You can get fried 随便, which is fried anything, which is just a bunch of vegetables.
So, okay.
So-
I'm just curious on what exactly
Yeah,
is in
policy,
there when
yeah.
you say anything or
Just
whatever.
a bunch of vegetables.
This is the real cultural difference.
I was
yes.
going to say though, usually though, if your host in China says, "What would you like to drink?" and you say, "Oh, anything's fine," most of the time they'll bring you tea in China.
Well, sometimes the second question would be, is tea okay?
Right.
Or is Coke okay? Or something hot or something cold?
Right.
I think the story in Japan, though, was not. It was not the same as in the West when they ask you if you drink tea or coffee, because this would be at one particular moment of the day, which is usually either there are two particular moments, either breakfast or either the afternoon. But it's not for other occasions where I think it's more about Japanese people serving tea a lot, even when you're being a guest at their house, or even when you get to a restaurant, they pour you some tea first, and they do that in quite a few Chinese restaurants too.
How do you do it back in France? Do you wine?
First of all,
Yes.
there's one thing that has to be given to you in any restaurant. You can ask for water. In France, it's illegal for a restaurant not to give water.
Okay.
You cannot. I know that in Beijing, I asked my girlfriend who's in the business and asked, "Is there any law to say that
No.
you can ask for how do you call this kind of
A
bottle?
carafe
A
of
carafe.
water?
Yeah, you say carafe too.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so it's a carafe. It's tap water. And in France, you can ask for tap water without paying for it. If they make you pay for it, it's illegal.
You can always ask for hot water or warm
Yes.
water in China.
Boiled water.
Yes, in Chinese restaurants, if you want your free water,
Yeah.
it's boiled water.
And my mother was telling me that it was because she loves tea. She drinks tea all the time in France too. And she was telling me that she was amazed at the fact that boiled water was free everywhere in China. She was saying that,
I have my tea, my leaf tea. Can I have
When
some hot water?
even when she goes to a tea house in France, she asks every time. They give a very, very small teapot, and it's on purpose. And it's very hard to ask for more boiled water.
But that's what the business is about. And
I
if
know.
you bring your own tea,
But they want, and you have a lot of people who actually, when they don't have enough tea, will think, okay, well, I have to get a new one and buy a new one because the leaves will be new and it'll be better. And I think they forced people into thinking like this, whereas Chinese people will drink out of the same bunch of tea leaves until
Multiple times.
until there is nearly no taste, and then change it maybe. But
Right.
it's a different tradition.
well, I mean, when it comes to tea, we always have so many stories to
Oh,
tell.
yeah.
Okay, very short break, and when we come back, more pictures to show you. And welcome back to Crossover, and you've got another story to tell about tea or what?
It's about boiled water.
Okay.
It's a very good piece of advice for anyone who has a small hotel in the West. If you want to attract Chinese tourists, just right at the front door, we have boiled water in the rooms.
But don't they have a boiler? I mean,
No,
No,
not
no.
necessarily.
No?
No.
No.
Whoa.
And you see that in many hotels in Paris.
Some do, but not all.
Not all.
Not all
So the
the
way
time.
Boiled
to
water is so important for Chinese people. Last time I told this story, it was I was with my friends at the Paris airport, and we were, hungry and wanted to have something Chinese. It's the instant noodles. So we have those boxes, and with the dried noodles in there.
All you
we
need
didn't
is
have
hot water.
Yeah, we didn't have hot water.
Find a place that sells coffee, and they have the big
That's
machines.
exactly what we did. We just went up to Starbucks, one of the Starbucks, and basically what we thought was at the time, if you just go directly to the Starbucks and asking for hot water might be not that appropriate. So what we did was one of us would just go there and buy a cup of coffee. And then asked
For hot water?
the serviceman, can I have some hot water? And it worked.
It worked?
Pretty well.
Oh, good.
For all these boxes.
You can also do something else. Ask for a cup of coffee, but say, please, I'll do the coffee myself. Give me the water and the coffee separately.
And coffee back to you. Anyway, these are little jokes. Well, actually, these are the experiences.
Yes.
The interesting experiences of boiled water. Just how important it is. You can't imagine it. Sometimes we have this idea, perception boiled water has to be hot. Mm-hmm. But we do drink cold water. It's
boiled?
Only it's
Cold
boiled.
water?
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah.
In summertime we do drink cold water, so it's not always hot. Hot water, not always hot boiled water.
But it's not always full of ice.
No.
That's a big difference in the States.
We
If
don't-
you ask
we
for a
don't
glass
actually.
of water, it's full of ice. It's so cold you can't drink it.
No.
And maybe the ice
So-
was once boiled water that they made. Okay. Next picture.
Okay. Let's just move on to the next one.
Well, the most obvious example I've seen were Japanese tourist buses. And I think if it's what it means about going to touristic sites and Europeans seeing by themselves and Asians taking more pictures, I don't know if it's what it means.
Yeah,
but
that's what it's about. And when traveling, Westerners tend to look a lot, and
Yeah.
you don't really. Well, sometimes you do take pictures, but basically it's about the scenes. Well, in Asia, if we say for Chinese people, when we go to a tourist spot, we see, but at the same time we take pictures, and many cases with ourselves in it.
I think especially if you're on a tour and you're only given 5 minutes in a huge cathedral,
Yeah.
you don't have the time to really go around and look at everything the way you
Yeah.
might want to. So taking pictures can be, a good way to get as much of it as you can, and then you can look at it and appreciate it
Yeah, either you take
when you
this-
have the time.
Yeah, either you take these scenes back home in pictures, or you have something to show your friends. See, this is a nice place. I've been there. Look, all these pictures I've taken over there.
Right,
Yeah,
and also with pictures, if I look through friends of mine, like my Chinese girlfriend's vacation photo albums, she went to Malaysia recently, and she came back and showed me her pictures, and she was in a lot of the pictures of the sea, and whereas if it had been me, I might have just taken pictures of the sea. I wouldn't want me in the picture. But, what she was saying to me was, she said, look, I stood there.
I like to take people because when I'm at a very beautiful scenery, I think tons of people have taken this picture, and you can find it on the internet, and it's going to be a much more beautiful picture
Better
than whatever
quality.
better quality.
Yeah, than whatever you take.
Exactly, because they don't have professional
Lanes.
So for me, it's all about just taking the facial expression of my friends, or capturing the
your
moment. Capturing the moment. I think personally, this is what attracts me with pictures.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't take pictures of sceneries.
But I guess the habit of taking pictures with ourselves in these pictures has a lot to do, especially in China, with the history. Because in the old days, if we go back, say, 20 years ago, to have a camera, not to mention a digital camera, to take a picture.
Was a big deal.
It is a big deal, and sometimes we had to go to those photography
Studios, right?
to take pictures of yourself for maybe a birthday celebration, or maybe with all these family members when they're traveling, they're tourists, but they're very well dressed in suit and tie, and it's because it is a big thing for them to travel, and they want to look smart in the pictures. And sometimes it's not that comfortable, to walk long distance. But this has a lot to do with history.
I was on the Great Wall last month, and there was a woman in a dress. It was a very hot day. In a dress,
High heel?
pearl necklace, high heels,
For Great Wall.
climbing Badaling, which is the steepest part of the Great Wall, of the, you know, the tourist spots of the Great Wall.
Was she taking pictures?
Yes, she was.
I mean,
And it
yeah.
made me feel, you know, at first I thought, oh my gosh, here's a woman wearing high heels on the Great Wall. And then I saw her, and she was with her husband, who was dressed very well, and then with their daughter, who was in a frilly dress and hair bows, and they were posing for pictures.
Exactly. Look nice, though, you know, with all the nice dress and high
You know,
heels.
we've talked about this before, and I just want to mention it. With weddings and wedding photos, what you just said, you know, the fact that Chinese couples will go to the studio to take professional wedding photos makes a lot of sense. Because on their wedding day, they might not necessarily have the money to pay for a professional photographer to come take pictures of the whole wedding. So they don't have the option necessarily to take pictures at their wedding. So they go to the studio so that they can have these pictures.
Well, in studios, you have all the lighting, you
Yes,
have all these
exactly.
professional photographers.
Exactly.
And talking about photographs, we do have a lot of stories to tell. And I have another one. I know you have another stories to tell. And we're going to take a short break. And welcome back to Crossover. So, your story first.
My story. Well, there's something that we see more in China, I think. It's about pictures of children, and there's this kind of service you have now in a lot of studios. You can rent all types of different clothes for your child, and a friend of mine did that for first anniversary, second anniversary, birthday of the. I'm being French.
Yeah, in French it's anniversary.
He every time he had different clothes for the child, and it's so cute. You see the 2-year-old or 3-year-old child wearing policeman or
How cute, the themed clothing.
team clothing or Kung
Costumes.
Fu master costumes or anything. Even a friend of mine.
Batman,
how great.
Superman.
And another friend of mine even did that for her baby when he was, I think, 6
Couldn't
months
even
old.
walk.
Yeah,
Couldn't
6
walk.
months old, and he was wearing all kinds of tiger skin or
I mean, and these days, talking about new business, photography for animals or for your pets. You know, it's no such a big deal, not as big as years ago to take pictures. So you wouldn't see that many people, especially young people, wearing so formally when traveling. And it's not always, you know, we take pictures with ourselves in it. Sometimes it's basically just scenes.
And you know, you see that in photographs, old photographs, say photographs from my grandmother's age in the United States when photography wasn't that common, at least when she was growing up. You know, the photographs she has of herself are very stylized, you know, studio, tinted, beautiful.
So we all have
photographs.
those phases.
Yes, of course.
Different
Whereas
faces.
now,
Of course.
now it's more about capturing the moment
Yes.
and anytime, anywhere. And so many times you have your own camera and you're playing with your phone and you realize that you only have time to grab the moment with your phone. Today's phones have
So
great
multifunctional, so
Yeah.
powerful, and it's all more about sharing the moments with your friends, and that's why you can at any moment post your pictures on the internet. You share it with your friends wherever they might be.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. More pictures to show you. And Charlotte,
Okay, this one's not hard. Pale skin in China is what is considered beautiful, or
Yeah.
what, you know, an ideal to go for. And in Germany or Western countries, maybe, to be tan or have darker skin
Yeah,
is
So-
beautiful.
my
So
first,
it has nothing to do with the underwear color.
No.
you're talking about the bikini.
No, no.
The color is different too.
Julianne, come on, focus.
Anyway, yeah, exactly. I mean, we have different aesthetics. So we have different criteria for being beautiful. We talked about this, and being pale is just important for Chinese women, Chinese girls, and that's why we see so many umbrellas when it's so shiny. Well,
Yeah.
all
So
the
hot
Westerners
out.
say, well, what a fantastic weather for for tanning my skin.
It's true. It's true. But I think we've discussed. Where does this come from? This sort of idea of tan is beautiful or darker skin is beautiful versus paler skin is beautiful. And we were saying that in China, to have pale skin is a sign of you being able to maybe stay inside and
you're not exposed to all the labor.
Yeah, to the
sunshine.
elements and laboring outside. Whereas I think darker skin, tan skin in Western countries, I think it's more of a recent beauty phenomenon.
Is it
Yes, it's
50, 60
a
years ago?
sexy thing.
50, 60 years maybe.
Yes, I would say that, and don't forget that back in those days, I mean, white people were still the main sort of race in those countries, and there was a lot of, how do you say, inequalities or inequalities in society. And more we started to have immigration and people traveling to all different countries.
And equal rights for everyone.
And you could see a lot of mixed races and beautiful and a lot of
beautiful skin
colors. I mean, now you see a lot of the most beautiful models in the U.S. Especially. They are all from multiple origins. I remember even Jessica Alba. I think she has I don't know how many different origins.
And that's a really good point. That might also has something to do with our changing views of what's beautiful. But I think you made this point when we were just talking, is that to be able to lie in the sun, go to the beach, lie by a pool, lie in the sun, is a sign of
lifestyle,
wealth.
elite lifestyle.
A sort of more luxurious lifestyle.
Yeah.
Is the contrary as here in the tradition?
Opposite.
Where
that's why we wouldn't understand in many cases, and then when people see signs like that on the beach, people would just take off the clothes and lie with your face down on the beach, and people would be okay. And hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Qi Xiaojun with Charlotte and Julian, and today we're going to continue our series on the differences of lifestyles between China and basically German, but Western, and it is actually based on all the graphics designed by a designer, Chinese-German, Liu Yang. The lady, she was born here in China, but she went to Germany when she was only 13, and she studied in Germany, in Berlin, in London, in New York. And so she's got the opportunity to compare different cultures, and that's why she's got this project, all these graphics telling the differences. So today we're referring to these pictures again to see how different we might be. Some pictures we might agree upon, but some not necessarily.
So but I have to say, it's still quite an innovative way to go about doing cultural comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not you agree with it or whether or not you think it's true, it's still interesting.
There's one thing you could disagree on, but I kind of agree actually with the principle in a way, which is that she compares China to the West. Whereas, if you think countries, you should compare
the West. When we say the West,
yeah,
right.
you should. It's tough to say. Sometimes if you could compare maybe Oriental culture and Western culture, or Western versus Eastern, but when you try to do China versus the world or China,
she's a Chinese and she was born here, and I guess she couldn't. I guess she was not in that position to represent more Asian countries.
And also, I mean, on this debate, I think it has its own meaning, because China is so big, and it's the only language in the world also that writes only meaning and not sounds. Totally, I mean. So in a way, China is a small world. So most of the time when people try to compare China to France, for example, I say, well, you can compare China to Europe, actually, and see the whole picture.
Yeah, I mean, although we say West might not be the right term to represent all these Western countries, it's still, we're
Yes.
talking about two different mindsets.
Yeah, and I think
Asian,
also two
Western,
sort
Oriental.
of historical influences.
Yeah.
You know, Europe pretty much shares the same historical influence.
Yes.
Granted, they're different countries, but a lot of main influences are general for all of Europe, whereas
Agreed.
China is, you know,
Yeah.
its own historical influence as well.
Okay, let's get down to all these graphics,
Okay.
all the pictures. Let's take a look at the first one for today.
I'm not sure. Is it a word game about going directly to the point and? I don't
No,
know.
we've done
No,
that one.
yeah.
No,
No.
might this be obstacle?
Now, this is, yeah, something like that. It's what it says, it's the ways of dealing with problems.
Okay.
Yes. Well.
So in the West, supposedly, you go charge straight through the problem, and in China, you go around the problem.
Yeah, I guess that really depends on what the problem is, where the
Yeah.
problem is. And
Yeah.
if the problem is going to that black spot from the front side or just going into that black spot.
You know, I think this relates back to, I think, one of the first pictures we saw about relationships. No,
Yeah.
not relationships. It was about ways of communicating, where the picture was a straight line for the West and then a very
Zigzagging for
curvy,
Chinese.
squiggly line for China. And we talked about how it has to do with harmony, and in China, you know, people, rather than be too clashing, they'll go for harmony over, you know, confrontation. So I think this kind of fits in with that.
I guess it's more about the philosophy that Chinese people believe. Say, if you're talking about the final target, okay, that's what it matters. We've reached the final target, no matter what. Just make sure the principles are there. They are not broken. We say, if the principles are there, it's all right for us to be flexible.
Yes, flexible is a good word to bring into this discussion, because in China, being flexible or
it's-
flexibility is
it's-
key.
It's everything.
It
It's everything.
really is, and I think that's a great thing for people.
And there's also one thing in Chinese culture, and my teacher teaches me that a lot. When you face problems, and especially between people, and you feel that you won't change somebody. Many times in the West, we try to, you know, we
break it.
very easily. We enter into very, very heated discussions about
Debates
topics. We have
and-
debates,
yeah.
and even in France, you see even about politics. People talking in a bar. I don't even know that person, and you would talk about this. And even between very good friends, if you have really divergent opinions, you might just not be friends at all after that because of your different
little
opinions.
argument.
Whereas Chinese people don't judge people on pure opinions, you know. So it's really interesting to feel that sometimes when you have all those problems in China, you're being taught to
Respect, actually,
to
others'
respect other
opinions.
people's opinion and realize also that you won't change the other person. Whereas Westerners, we tend to want to change the other
But
people.
the thing is, I mean, we are also taught be more tolerant, to respect others' opinions. At the same time, you have to remind yourself, not everything you believe in is correct.
Sure.
Not everything you believe in is truth.
True, and just to I mean, I agree with everything we've said so far, but just to stand up for Western culture in this area, I mean, there is that element to our education as well. Of, you know, I mean, it's good to have things you believe in and be very, you know, sure and certain in your opinions, but at the same time to respect, you know, the people you're talking to and things like that. That's also
Yeah, but
somewhat part of our culture as well.
Yeah, but if you go back to this picture, if you see this picture again, on the left side, it would be, you know, Western mindset. It's in order to reach the final goal, whatever stands in the way, we're going to overcome it. We're going to, you know, just cross it. But basically what we do in China is, you know, our final target is to reach the goal, not to tackle all these problems coming in the way. So the best way to do it is go around it. That's why we say in many cases, the shortest distance is never the straight line.
True. I think a reasonable, a decent difference between
Yeah.
Chinese culture and quite a few Western cultures.
I thought about a story my teacher told me about an old man in China, and you know, two people were arguing. You know, they were arguing about Zhuge Liang, who was famous, minister, or you know, from the Three Kingdoms period.
2,000 years ago.
Exactly. So he has different names, 诸葛亮 or 孔明, and two people are arguing. One is saying that 诸葛亮 and 孔明 is two different people, and obviously it's only one person. And so they argue about this. And so this guy, who obviously knows history and knows that it's the same person, calls the old man passing by and say, "Oh, you have to teach him. Tell him that, help me here, I can't bring him to reason. Tell him that it's the same person." And so he talks to the other guy for a while, and at the end he says, "Yes, you're right. It's indeed two different people." And so the other guy who knows history stays with the old guy, and the other guy leaves very happy and proud of himself. He says, "Why did you tell him that? You know that I was right. Why do you help him?" He said, "Well, because they had a bet on before, so maybe he gave him like 10 yuan or something for that." I said, give him 10 yuan and let him be stupid for the rest of his life. But it's a way, it's a joke, but it's a way of reminding you that sometimes when you don't change, when you know that you won't change somebody, just forget about it, let it be, and as Xiaojun was saying, go for the ultimate goal of what you want to do today,
Well, it's obviously an invented story, but let's just take a break, and when we come back, more pictures to show you. And we'll come back to Crossover, and here comes the next one.
All right.
Let's take a look. Charlotte? Well, it seems that it snows a lot in the west.
Well, I don't think this has to do with snow. Although cold, maybe. My guess is because it's 3, and I'm getting this from the bowl, looks like with the steam, and not so much from the snowflakes, that these are 3 meals?
Yeah.
And that in China, the red, it's 3 hot meals, so people are used to eating hot food for their meals. And in many Western countries, you might have cold breakfast, a hot lunch, and then a cold dinner.
Germany,
true.
somebody who has spent a few years in Germany told me about that a few days ago. That in Germany, many people were eating cold for dinner.
Like what?
For dinner, even.
Yeah, well, it's very frequent. Even in France, you will have salads. You will have also the we call it charcuterie in French. I don't know. It's all the sausages and ham
cold cuts or lunch meats.
Exactly.
They call it, yeah.
So it's going to be a lot of those.
Yeah, basically, Chinese people love hot food.
Yes.
Anything hot is supposed to be good for your health.
I remember even seeing old people in China when I just came here. Taking some yogurt and putting it in the microwave.
Heat it up a bit. Yeah, I mean, I think that ties into Chinese medicinal philosophy, or cold is a shock to your system, and something warm or even something hot is much more kind on your whole body's balance and system.
It goes back to the discussion that we had before. It's about Chinese people drink hot water or boiled water.
Hot fruit juice too.
Exactly.
It's not everyone. I mean, you see less and less, but still you see that.
You can pretty much get any kind of drink hot here if you ask. I mean, it might not typically be served hot.
Not Cokes, though.
But you could ask. You could ask for them to heat it up for you.
They won't look at you like you were a zombie or something.
No, of course not.
And in the morning, that very much traditional Chinese breakfast would be congee and bread. Anything hot. And last time, once I was traveling in Rome, in Italy, and one of the attractions they had to tourists were basically we have Chinese breakfast.
Oh man, if I had seen that sign, I would have gone.
You would go?
I love Chinese breakfast.
Really?
Love them.
I mean,
I love them.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right to have bread or whatever Western for some time, but
it's interesting.
Somehow you would miss your Chinese food if you are
so
traveling.
much.
I know foreigners, Westerners, who have been here for more than 10 years and still cannot have anything salty for breakfast. It has to be sweet.
I love salty. When years ago, my family took a trip to Italy, and I was so happy eating Italian breakfast, actually, because they had salami and cheese and bread and coffee, and I loved it. It made me actually think of Chinese breakfasts because it wasn't just cereal and milk.
Whereas in France, it was, now it's a lot of cereal and milk, but back in the day, when I was in the 80s, it was still bread, butter, and jam.
Well, that's good too.
Yeah,
but that's not salty.
Having said that, always hot food, but we do have cold dishes in
Yes.
Chinese cuisine. So we've got some pictures for you. This is rice noodles.
Rice noodle.
Yeah.
A cold
Rice, flat noodles.
flat rice noodles.
Looks nice.
This is
Rice
jellyfish.
noodle.
This
maybe.
is jellyfish.
All cold. These are all served cold.
Yep.
These are starters. I mean,
But again,
it's
these are
usually starters.
appetizers. You wouldn't just
Appetizers.
eat this for your meal.
But it's
No.
interesting that in China, I mean, in proper restaurants, they usually will serve the starters, the cold dishes before. But in many small restaurants, they don't really feel that it's important
I
to
like
put
that
the cold meals before.
Cucumber. Well, we do have cold dishes actually, even in small restaurants, and some
Yeah.
simply made, some maybe more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are the ones that we tend to find in most restaurants.
Yes.
Oh, this is the husband and wife lung slices.
Yeah.
You're scaring people away
Although
from
I
China.
have to say though, I have to say this. I have a good platform to say this. With the cucumbers, Chinese cucumbers are the best cucumbers in the entire world.
How come?
They
Explain
just
it.
are. They're different. The
mean
cucumbers you get in the States are nothing compared to the cucumbers here. The cucumbers here are sweet. They don't have, their seeds are small. They're crispy. And look
some
at
good
them.
ones.
They're so much better.
But I still
so much better.
But lots of people still miss the cucumbers of the past. I mean, years ago when it was not so much about the farms, it's naturally.
All natural
Yeah,
products.
I'm
Which is
sure.
why I'm telling you, vegetables in France and fruits are something.
Are good. Well, cucumbers still,
And in China-
hands down. China has the best
And in
cucumbers.
China, honestly, and in China, all vegetables and fruits in the south of China are usually much better than the north.
I guess it's the difference of weather. Yeah.
Weather and
Climate
also
is
soil.
different.
It's more
probably,
water.
too.
Anyway, when it comes down to food, we have lots of stories to tell. But
Just wait a sec, because I scared people away with the husband and wife
Yeah, I wanna make
lung
it up.
slices. We have to say that. What is it exactly? I'm not sure, but.
It's like gizzards, right?
What is it?
夫妻肺片. It's
well, it's kind of a liver slices.
liver slices.
Liver slice, yeah, there are a few parts, but it's not as scary as it sounds. I was just making a joke with the translation because we talked a lot about this, especially during the Olympics.
You have to
about
stop there.
people, no, about people who were translating literally some names that were here in the tradition
Yeah.
into English. So of course it scares people away.
Anyway, we're not talking about these names or mistranslations.
no more food.
Couple pictures to show you, but before that, a short break. And we'll come back to crossover. More pictures to discuss.
Okay.
Here is the next one.
One for lunch.
It's Julian.
Huh.
Well, this is
there,
pretty
there are
straightforward.
years.
There are
Actually, it
years.
says 1970 and.
I know what it is.
What is it? Is it?
I know what it is.
It's 1970 and 2006.
I know what it is.
Yeah.
I know what it is. It's because in Europe the what it means, I guess, from a Chinese point of view, is that the industrialization
Industrialization. Yep.
started much earlier than in China, and now actually because of all the work that has been done for the environment and everything, people in the cities are starting less and less to use cars and polluting ways of transport, and now they use bicycles.
There's been a movement,
in cities.
a green movement.
Whereas in China, everyone was using a bicycle in the cities, and now more and more people can have a car. And even though in some cities now in China you have traffic that is unseen in cities in Europe,
Yeah.
people still want to buy a car.
I mean-
so it's a different, it's different times for in
New
the evolution.
developments is
Yes.
talking about the ways of transport. In the 70s, you drive cars, and these days you ride bicycles. In China, we rode bicycles in the 70s, and nowadays we drive cars.
We're driving
and
cars.
You're talking about low carbon lifestyle. It's just not fair to many of us. And these are the pictures that we see in front of the Tiananmen.
Those
Gate.
20 years ago, I would
Actually,
say.
and you know what, to say something in China's favor, in with regards to transportation, China really does have a low carbon footprint. If you think about how many people China has,
yeah, per
the
person.
number of people who ride bicycles versus drive cars, whereas if you think of America, how many people
It's,
drive cars?
I think it's 5 times less per
Relative
person.
to the
Relatively,
population, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so go China, man, with all the bicycles.
Well,
Seriously.
be careful. You still have to take care of the environment.
Well, true, True, true.
If every Chinese person used the same amount of carbon
Well,
than the U.S. people,
But the thing is,
the world would explode.
in China, we do have this saying: you don't actually quit eating because you've got the risk of being choked.
Well, that's
So
true.
you have the problem. To solve these problems, it's not because of these problems you cancel all the possibilities of development.
One thing, though,
This shows,
It's,
you know, is he the mayor of London?
I'm
I'm
not
not sure,
quite
but I
sure.
know he's a politician.
a public person.
Yes, he's a public person. But you see that even in Beijing, a lot of European and American, even people from the embassies or some big responsible for the big companies, they ride the bicycle
Well, I have
every
to say,
day.
I mean, all over the world now there's a trend. Even in China,
Yeah.
where you know, people are wanting more and more cars, but still at the same time, there's a huge effort to go green and to, you know, choose alternate forms of transportation,
And
including
bicycles-
in the United States as well.
Well,
so.
exactly.
And
Well,
bicycles in China are much more fancy, I guess, sometimes.
That's true. You
I
can
don't
find
know.
really fancy bikes.
But you do notice the changes in the past several decades, say, because you used to see that many bicycle repairs just by the road. And one of the owners of the bicycle repairs, he was complaining actually. Years ago, normally he got, you know, business was pretty good, and he got 50 to 6 bicycles. But these
50 to 60 bicycles
yeah, but these days to repair.
a day.
Yeah, day.
Oof.
But these days it's only, you know, less than 10, I guess, in
Yeah.
the cases. But we do notice the changes happening in the past decades. Because, you know, we used to see lots of bicycle repairs just by the road.
Yes, little like vendors,
Yeah.
little stalls.
Yeah, these owners, they're complaining about, you know, declining of business. Because in past days, maybe 20 years ago, they get like dozens of bicycles to be repaired. But these days, there's only 5, 6 a day
A
maximum.
day. Wow, that's a pretty big change.
Yeah, bad news for them, maybe good news for those car owners.
And you can feel it sometimes. Well, usually what you feel is that bicycle repairing and also shoe repairing and key. How do you say duplicate keys?
Key
or
duplicating,
Key
yeah.
duplicating. It's all together.
Locksmiths.
And they understand that you cannot make a living out of
Just doing one.
doing
Yeah.
bicycles in one time. And sometimes I go there to how do you say 打气
Pump your bike.
to pump your tires.
Yeah.
And many times they don't even want money from you. Like how much can I give you?
do it.
And then I give one yuan or 2 yuan to be nice, but they don't even care. And you really realize that they don't make a real living out of it now. But to come back to the new form of energies right now in China. At the same time, I mean, we were saying about, you know, the carbon consumption and, you know, how it worries the world and everything, especially with the amount of population in China and India. But at the same time, as far as China is concerned, you know, things change so fast in China because once the policy is on, it goes faster than any
The
country.
whole country mobilizes.
Do you remember with
really,
SARS?
It really does.
Do you remember with SARS when it really became a national phenomenon, and from that moment until they actually solved the problem, it was like 2 or 3 months.
Well,
Whereas, you know, because they have the ability to mobilize people and everyone so fast. So I think once the policies will be on, because right now the wind energy, the solar energy, everything is developing so
yeah.
fast. You know, if someday the government realizes that, okay, now we can move on and start a new way of life.
Yeah, but well, I guess what you're saying has something to do with what we discussed actually in previous episodes about how the big me and the small me.
Yes.
How you're a part of a group, of a team, instead of just yourself. Because in some cases, I do hear reports about how foreigners are amazed by the achievements accomplished by China in a short time period, like a big project as big as the Olympic Games. And how come you've been able to mobilize the whole country to be dedicated in one project in the short period of time. I guess it's the understanding of bigger me and a small me.
Yep, the group versus the individual. You know, on that note about the Olympics, a friend of mine in the States could not believe with the part in the opening ceremonies for the Beijing Olympics when the
big
thousands, the drummers.
Fall. That's called the fall.
Yeah, the drummers.
The drummers in the beginning.
The ancient drum.
And they were all in unison. And my friend could not believe that so many people could be so in unison.
You want some inside information about that? I was on a show right after the Olympics with Chen Weiya, who was the vice director of Zhang Yimou. And I asked him, because I'm a musician, and I know one thing, sound travels very slowly in the air.
Yes.
So if you have that many people, there is no way the person who is over there and the person over there, there's no way they hear the sound they make at the same time. There is a delay.
But they do have the headphones.
Yes, they had the
headphones. And they do
exactly. So I asked him that, and he said, well, you couldn't see it on the cameras, but they all had this.
But even so,
it's unbelievable.
I mean,
yes.
the fact that they could all be in such unison was very impressive, and I think that comes down to big me, little me as well.
Exactly.
You know.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Chi Xiaojun with Charlotte and Julian. Again, another episode about the differences between China...
Is that the one?
Yeah, number 6.
Number 6.
Oh, yes.
Between Chinese lifestyle and Western lifestyle. Basically, it's German, because this is, again, based on the graphics designed by Liu Yang, the Chinese-German designer. So she's lived in both cultures for many years, and she's got the opportunity to compare the cultures and lifestyles in the two different worlds.
Today's our 6th episode on discussing her graphics.
Interesting.
That shows how many differences we do have.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Well, that's it. It's an interesting project. I mean, even if you don't agree with everything, but it makes us talk.
Well, you can agree, you can disagree, and basically this is what it is. And everyone has your own interpretations. Everyone has your own understandings of the lifestyle that you live in your world. So basically, we are just offering what we think about these lifestyles. So let's just get started with the first picture for today, Julian.
Just to clarify, the red represents China and the blue represents the West.
That's why it's clear when you know it.
We see here you've got a knife and fork for China, and then chopsticks and a Chinese spoon for
in the big cities.
The West.
Yes.
Basically, what it's saying is it says what is in trend in the two societies. Say in the West, people think using chopsticks and spoons is cool. Is a trendy thing to do. While in China, we tend to say using knives and forks to be a trendy thing to do.
This is. I mean, I don't think there's much to talk about on this topic, because it's obvious that people like to try new things and meet other cultures.
And the other thing is the grass is always greener on the other side. So you always kind of are interested in what you don't have or what isn't a daily thing for you.
You don't have that, you treasure that, or you want to have a tryout, and this is also something new, something fun to do.
Yeah, or you're just curious about it, or it's more fun because it's different.
To put it on another, well, I wouldn't say another level, but to just kind of take it back to actually everyday life. I think you see, if you think about the US, it would be LA or New York. If you think of China, it would be Shanghai, Beijing. Those cities obviously have a lot of people who in their everyday life eat, for Chinese people, Western food, the Western way with knife and forks. And also for Western people, Chinese Asian food. I wouldn't say Chinese, because chopsticks and the kind of Chinese spoon, this is Asian. This is not only Chinese. So they eat with chopsticks because they eat sushi, they eat sashimi.
Food.
They eat Thai food, Vietnamese food, Korean food, Chinese food, eating Asian. You have a lot of restaurants in the West that are Asian, not only Chinese.
Well, that is a Chinese invention in the first place anyway.
It's true.
Anyway, but we do see the communication of different styles.
Yes.
We have this World Expo in Shanghai, and many foreigners, we're saying lots of foreigners know how to use chopsticks, but not everyone, and it might be very difficult for some. And there is a smart girl, a Chinese girl. She's invented, a very useful kind of like a glove. You put your fingers in, and then that way you control chopsticks very easily and very, very effectively.
You know what that makes me think of? It's not for chopsticks, but in the States we have something we call a spork, which is a spoon fork.
Spoon fork, yes.
It's a fork that's kind of, it can be used as a spoon and as a fork.
You get that in the plane sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, as a plastic spork.
Yeah,
yes, you get
spork.
that in the plane.
Yeah,
with the meal.
All these fantastic inventions.
Yep.
But by the way,
Yeah.
here, before you get to the next picture, you know about Western or Chinese and the mixture of everything. There's an interesting phenomenon about the food too, because a lot of those, the kind of so-called chains of tea houses you have in China that where you can eat Western style food, and the menus of Western style food, you eat it with a knife and a fork, but it's still, it can be rice or noodles and stuff. And it's interesting because for Chinese people, they call that Western food, and eat that with a fork and knife because they think it's Western food.
And it's not Western at all.
And for Westerners who come to China, because they're used to Chinese food that is kind of Westernized in the West, they see that, oh, this is typical Chinese food, and they ask for the chopsticks in it. I've seen that so many times.
Wow, what a perfect combination. That is the niche market. Anyway, let's move on to the next picture.
I think this might be the role of the child in a family. In China, the child is the center of the parents' and the grandparents' life.
Yeah,
they
on the
revolve
right side,
around,
yeah.
the red side. They revolve around the child. And in the West, the child is more with the parents, and the grandparents are there, but not the way it is in China.
Yeah, basically it also connects to what we discussed about elderly people's life and how the elderly people might have a very important role to play in taking care of the grandchildren.
Yes, but because if we discuss about that, there's one thing that comes back and back when we discuss different cultures, which is some differences are just differences about different times. Whereas, when you talk about, freedom of the students at school or the relationship between students and teachers, you see the US or Europe in the 1950s or 60s, it was much harsher from the teachers on the students than now even in China. So sometimes it's not about cultures, it's about different times. And here it's typical, the pictures about China with all the child being the center of attention of the whole family in several generations. This is typical post-1980s phenomenon.
Yeah, but this also has something to do with the one-child policy.
Exactly.
Right.
If you have only one child for one generation, sometimes if it's twins, then you've got two children.
But again, though, I agree completely that it is. I mean, 1980 being, once with the one-child policy really coming into effect. But I do think historically, the children, the role of children in a family, in a society is quite like that picture.
It's like a combined glue.
Yes, even if we go back past 1980, earlier. They've held a very high position in the family structure.
Well, I understand that, but it still comes back to how many children you have. Because in a family, my teacher was telling me that when he grew up, which was the 1940s and the beginning of the 50s, they were like 11 or 12 children in the family.
Oh, wow.
Well, back then that was it. I mean, a lot of families, there was no one-child policy back then. So he was telling me that what they were doing was basically, when they were not at school, they were just playing outside, and there would be no old people or parents taking care of them all day long. They were playing outside all day long and just come back for dinner.
I agree, but I still think the role of the child in the family. It's not so much how much they're attended to necessarily, but I don't know. I think
for me, it's not really cultural differences. It depends on so many things. Even if you look back, let's say 100 years in China, there have been since the end of the Qing dynasty, and look at all the changes, all the different generations. For every 10 years or every few years, you can say that there have been big changes enough for people to put all their hopes on the next generation, on their children, and hoping. Even in the 1920s and 30s, so many of the Chinese, the good families, the elite, they would go abroad to study. They were also the hope of the country. And then, and then also after the liberation in '49 and after the Cultural Revolution, when so many children didn't go to school the way they wanted to, and suddenly the generation that grows up after Deng Xiaoping, the opening up policy. And those ones become, the hope of the next generation. It has been like that all the time. So in China, the past 100 years have been so complicated, and people have been wanting for and hoping that the really, really great left will come in the next generation so much.
I don't want to go back that early, I say 100 years. But if you see this picture from a different angle, say in 20, 30 years' time, when the child grows up, when he's got his or she's got her family. And that means, because you're the only child, you have to take care of all these elderly people.
Yes.
Your parents, and maybe your spouse's parents.
Yes.
And possibly the grandparents.
Yes, and you don't have siblings to share in that responsibility with you. It will be interesting to see how that will change this picture.
Yeah.
Because it will change. It has to change.
So that's why you were talking about the role of the children. I was focusing more on the attention they get.
Right.
So
it's been hotly debated, actually, among intellectuals, the scholars, or social scientists. They are working maybe on I don't know if there is an ideal way. They're working on it to solve the potential problem of one child, one couple taking care of all these elderly people.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, more graphics to share with you. And we'll come back to Crossover, and we've got more pictures to show you. And Julian,
this is interesting.
Tough. This is tough.
It's a tough one, yeah. Well, give you some clue. It's more about different attitudes towards novelties or new things.
Well, then
basically, what it's saying, say in the West, people tend to keep a distance and observe the new things from a distance. While in China, Chinese people tend to be much closer to the new things, and they want to have the new things in hand and have a touch.
I think I understand what she means, but it has to do with the times also in China, because for the past 30 years it has developed so fast, especially the younger generations. Like in a blink of an eye, some things have disappeared in the everyday life. The attention to a lot of traditions has disappeared. So to some point, I think when people say, okay, I forget about this, I want to live a modern life, and especially there's no religion in China the way it is in the West, where it's really sometimes the core of the way people think, whereas in China, it has never been like that. So I think in China, when they say no to the traditions, it's easier to suddenly absorb a lot of new things, whereas in the West, you still have so many people in the US, it's the same, who have a religion, who have traditions that will stay here. So they appear to be very open, but at the end,
very conservative.
They are very conservative.
It might also have something, this is taking the picture a little, sort of looking at it a little differently, but it has been my experience, with if you look at it in a more simple way, like there's, say, this cup is very interesting, for example. It's some new cup. And you have, say, an American and a Chinese person in the same room looking at this weird cup. The American might not come up and touch it and go like that, but the Chinese person might.
And also, this has something to do with the fact that we are raised to have an opinion on everything.
Oh, and also, we're also raised, look, don't touch. That's one
that's
of the
another
first
thing.
things that your parents will teach you as a child is you can look, but you can't touch.
I'm not quite sure about this picture because I don't feel that strongly in this regard. I mean, when the Chinese people are more curious than the Westerners, whether they, tend to. Well, we do see people do lots of touchings in these tourist spots, and that's why we see many parts of a line or a sculpture shiny.
That's true.
But that's because sometimes they were told by the tourist guides, it brings you good luck if you have a touch on the surface, on the foot, or anywhere. But I'm not quite sure.
You know what I just brought to the discussion? I'm not sure. I mean, everyone can discuss about it. I think it's interesting. Because we were talking about the differences between Western and Eastern philosophy, especially the Chinese philosophy, where you're raised to basically, not try to change everything and try to kind of absorb everything around more. And I think we are raised in the West much more to have an opinion on a lot of things, whereas Chinese people, they don't judge people on pure opinions. And you can talk about your opinions much more freely.
So what does that have to do with new things?
Well, it has to do with new things because I think Western people, we rely more easily to something they know of, they heard about, and will say, this is nothing. Whereas Chinese people, sometimes they are not too eager to have an opinion on that thing.
Well, we might have an opinion, but it's only we are told not impose
that way.
Not impose your opinions on someone else.
With culture, it's the same. You know how Chinese people, the last 100 years, look, the Western culture is a main topic in Chinese everyday life, in the newspapers, in the medias, whereas, the Eastern culture is more a fashion thing or a mysterious thing.
Well, not so much anymore, but now I think it's much more a daily part of our news and...
I guess, China is now ready to, maybe Chinese people tend to think it's no harm if I have a little tryout with the new stuff, the new gadgets. That's why we see all these new models of mobile phones being so well in China. All these new models, maybe the latest developments
like this one
in China.
That's true. You see more. Keep your phone in your pocket. You do see a much faster turnover with people. I'll see a friend one day, and maybe a month later, that my friend will have a new phone, the latest, this phone, or the latest that phone, or camera, or fashion even, or that's a good point.
And last point about philosophy, and then we can talk about some of that later.
You're going back to 100 years again, huh?
No. Well, much more. It's maybe 2,500 years ago. In the tradition, we were saying how the Chinese philosophy teaches you to adapt yourself to the environment and not to try to change everything. So in the core of the Chinese philosophy and the society, Chinese people adapt to new things much quicker than foreigners that tend to want to change the new things that come, or not letting them be themselves. Chinese people, as we say, they can go around everything. They can embrace everything, as we say, 海纳百川, to have like the if you translate that as it's a Chinese proverb that means the sea can englobe all the rivers.
Yeah, you can put the whole sea in the heart.
I think this might have something to do with that.
Maybe.
But how would you translate this story then? iPhone 4, iPhones, and iPads. You see the long queues even several days before its official launch. I guess that shows also the that also shows the curiosity of Western consumers.
That's true. Sure. That's true. I was in the States for the launch of the iPhone 4, and there was a huge line of people outside the Apple Store waiting to get their new iPhone.
To have the new gadget.
I don't understand it. I'm not a...
Anyway, we'll move on, and before we present more graphics, a short break. And welcome back to Crossover, and here comes the final picture for this series. Let's just take a look.
Woo, we're at the end. Just to clarify again, red is representative of China and blue is representative of Germany and maybe
we can
Western
see,
countries.
So is
we
it
can
the
see
view?
the teapot, rice, chopsticks, or maybe is it a banana? Or
A
I think-
sausage?
It might
oh,
be.
no. She's German. That's a sausage.
Okay.
That's a sausage
That's a mug
and
of beer.
And
that's a
traditional
top
German
hat.
hat.
basically, it's about the how would you case? It's the
Perception, I think.
the perception of each other's.
Right. So in China, their perception of, say, Germans would be very, very generalizing here, but a tall hat, eating sausages,
Sausage.
and drinking beer. Whereas in Germany, people might think of China as chopsticks and a bowl of rice, a teapot, and a traditional Chinese
Yeah,
hat.
I guess it's pretty much true with teapot because it's tea drinking country and
the rice.
we eat rice.
And the hat too.
The hat, it's
Oh,
more
yeah,
about, say, this is a farming
some
culture,
areas.
a farming, yeah. In the early, in the 1980s, Zhang Yimou's film, The Red Sorghum, it was a huge success, especially in the West, and it won the, Golden Bear Award in
In Berlin, yes.
Film Festival. But back in China, it was a huge success, but it was a huge debate, saying, Zhang Yimou, you might be a great director, but how come you always chose subjects like showing the backward side of Chinese development of the country?
This is, I mean, I always debate of that with my Chinese friends because I'm saying, first of all, a movie director is not, he doesn't work, for the
Government.
tourism bureau
Right.
or, he works for himself. So what he does is he picks a topic. It might be the only family in the whole China that is like this. And it is it's even more worth of doing a film. And if that film is watched by many people, it's their problem if they think that the whole China is like that. And also, because a lot of the Chinese friends I have come from cities, obviously, I haven't experienced the life in China in the small villages or countryside, and neither have most of the Chinese people who grew up in cities. So who are we to say that this does not represent China? It's one side of China, and it's actually, it used to be a big part of the
True, I
population,
don't think
and it's
that
not a bad thing.
I don't think that the debate is it's not a side of China. I think the debate is that it's
Why you are showing this
why
side?
are you showing that side as opposed to
Because he grew up there too.
No. What the critics were saying at the time were, okay, Zhang Yimou, you might be doing this because you want to win a prize. You want to, cater to the taste of Western critics
Or
instead of
appeal.
showing the positive picture of your country.
appeal to the stereotype.
But
I mean, that's artistic license, I guess. I mean, Red Sorghum, that was a great film. I thoroughly enjoyed that film.
the Hong Gaoliang, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but yes, and honestly, because back then, at the time, let's say he would be doing a show about the skyscrapers in Shanghai. I mean, for Chinese people, it would be far away from their lives, so they wouldn't like to watch it. For Westerners, they would find it so funny because it's only like 0.something% of the Chinese people, and foreigners would also hate the film. Where is the point?
Well, I think, though, not to get stuck on a movie debate, but I do think, though, that especially back when Hong Gaoliang came out, there really weren't that many movies about China today out on the international scene. And so maybe that's in part why the debate began, because it's not like today where you can see all kinds of movies. You can see movies like that, and you can see modern,
But obviously, movies are very important in giving people that impression of
Absolutely.
how, the image of a country's people.
Also, one thing, because in China you have a new generation of people now who consider movie as a part of their entertainment. And so they don't like to see movies like that. Whereas for most European, I wouldn't say most, but for a big part of European people, and obviously all the Europeans who are judges on those big competitions, movie has to be a mirror of people's life. And movie is art. So art can reflect on reflect on everything, any reality. Even if it's, as I said, only one family among a billion people, It's a reality.
And I have to say, the picture that represented Germany with the sausage and the beer mug, I mean, that's actually an image of Germany that I think people all over the world might have.
Yes.
You know, beer. There are German beer festivals all over the world.
Yes.
I think it's up to, at the end of the day, it's up to education, it's up to every individual in any country. I mean, you cannot say, let's say, Charlotte would drink water like this, and I would say, oh, you Americans drink like this. You know, it's up to me to realize that to some point I cannot generalize like this after seeing one movie or one behavior. So, I mean, in any country, you will have people like that who see one movie and say, oh, it's like that in that country. Well, you cannot blame the director for that, or blame a book, or blame even a government, or anything. You blame only individuals.
And we are very much now these days globalized, and we are talking about this global village. When you drink Starbucks coffee, okay, you might be anywhere.
Right, and I was just going to say, you know, especially now more than ever before in the history of this world, you know, we're so international, and everyone is, you know, it's so easy to travel.